The hotel lobby glittered with chandeliers, laughter echoing from polished marble floors as guests clinked champagne glasses. Near the grand piano, a girl in a frayed hoodie hovered awkwardly, her hands stuffed in her pockets. "Can I play for food?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. A man in a tailored suit scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Play? You? Sweetheart, this isn't a charity." Laughter rippled, cruel and careless. The girl lowered her eyes, saying nothing. But behind the silence burned a secret no one could see. And if you stay, you'll witness how silence can roar. But before we dive into the story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us share more stories. The girl's name was Maya Carter. She was 17, though her thin frame and sunken cheeks made her look younger. She carried a backpack that had seen better days and wore sneakers that were torn at the soles. Most people, seeing her slouch posture and nervous eyes, wrote her off as another runaway or a burden on society. Nobody guessed that inside her lay a gift that could silence any room. Maya kept close to the piano as if it were an anchor. She didn't look directly at anyone, but she could feel their eyes on her, the stares, the whispers, the smirks. For her, the lobby was more than just a place with warmth and light. It was survival. A single plate of food from the hotel kitchen could mean she wouldn't go hungry that night. The man who had mocked her was Richard Hale, the hotel manager. He was the kind of man who believed that appearances were everything. His suit was always crisp, his hair perfectly slicked back. He looked at people like Maya as stains on his polished world, blemishes that needed to be removed. To him, the piano wasn't for the desperate. It was for wealthy guests to pose beside, maybe stumble through a Christmas carol. Richard's voice carried like a whip through the lobby. "This is not a bus station, young lady. We don't hand out meals for performances." His smirk drew chuckles from a group of guests nearby. They weren't cruel at heart, but laughter came easy when someone else had already set the tone. In that small circle of onlookers was Clara Thompson, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes. She was a school teacher who had come for a friend's wedding reception. Clara didn't laugh, though she also didn't speak up. Not yet. She shifted uncomfortably, pressing her lips together. Something about the girl reminded her of her own students, the quiet ones who carried unspoken stories in their silence. Beside Clara stood Ethan Ross, a young man who worked part-time at the hotel as a waiter. He balanced a tray of glasses, caught between duty and conscience. Ethan didn't like how Richard spoke to the girl, but he also knew what happened to employees who crossed the manager. For now, he stayed still, telling himself it wasn't his fight. The injustice hung heavy, invisible, but felt. Maya hadn't raised her voice, hadn't begged or argued. She had only asked a question. And yet that small act had drawn ridicule. The piano, gleaming under the chandelier lights, seemed like a stage locked away from her. She could almost hear the music in her head, aching to escape. But the barrier between who she was and how she was seen felt unbreakable. The lobby guests turned back to their conversations, dismissing her as a brief distraction. Richard straightened his tie, satisfied, but Clara's gaze lingered on Maya, and Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he set his tray down. Seeds of doubt had been planted, quiet, small, but waiting. Richard Hale adjusted his cufflinks and gave a sharp glance to the girl still lingering near the piano. She hadn't moved, hadn't slunk away as he expected. That irritated him. He prided himself on running a spotless hotel, one where guests felt pampered and shielded from the world's mess. And here was Maya, standing like a shadow in the corner of his perfect picture. "You've had your answer," Richard said louder this time, his voice slicing through the chatter of the lobby. "Move along. This is not a place for begging." The laughter came again, a little louder now, fed by Richard's confidence. A few guests shook their heads as though agreeing with him, as though her presence was a shameful thing. A man in a gray suit muttered, "She should be outside with the rest of them," and the words stung even though Maya kept her face still. Inside, her stomach tightened. She hadn't eaten since the morning before. Her mind whispered to her to leave, to avoid another round of humiliation, but her feet refused. Something in her heart anchored her to that piano, like invisible threads pulling her toward it. Richard noticed the hesitation and bristled. He hated defiance, even in silence. "Security!" he barked, snapping his fingers at a uniformed guard by the front doors. Heads turned, curiosity rising like a tide. The scene was becoming a spectacle. Clara Thompson's chest tightened as she watched. She whispered to her friend beside her, "She's just a kid. This isn't right." But her friend only shushed her, not wanting attention. Clara's instincts as a teacher screamed at her to step forward, but the power dynamics froze her. This was Richard Hale's domain, not hers. Ethan Ross, standing with an empty tray, saw the girl's shoulders stiffen at the word security. He knew Richard's style: public humiliation, swift removal, no mercy. Ethan had been on the receiving end of Richard's wrath once, for delivering a drink too slowly. His paycheck had nearly vanished with the penalty. He swallowed hard. If he stepped in, he could lose his job. But if he didn't, he'd be complicit in something cruel. The guard started toward Maya, and Richard smirked, satisfied. To him, this was order being restored. To Maya, it was another door slamming shut in her face. But then, something unexpected. An elderly woman in pearls leaned toward Richard. "Really, Mr. Hale, is that necessary? She's just a child." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of disapproval. Richard forced a smile. "Our guests deserve a refined atmosphere, Mrs. Whitmore. I assure you, we handle such matters discreetly." The word discreet landed hollow. Everyone could see this was anything but discreet. The tension in the air thickened. Guests began whispering, some uncomfortable, some entertained, all watching. The possibility of embarrassment for the hotel grew with every passing second. Maya finally lifted her head, her dark eyes catching the chandelier's light. For a brief moment, Richard faltered. There was something steady in her gaze, something that didn't fit the ragged hoodie or worn shoes, but he brushed it aside, telling himself it was just the stubbornness of street kids. "I'm not begging," Maya said softly, her voice carrying across the lobby. "I just wanted to play." The simplicity of her words stopped a few conversations cold. Clara's breath caught. Ethan's grip on the tray tightened. Richard, however, barked out a laugh. "Play?" he mocked, drawing the word out. "What, a lullaby on my grand piano? Do you even know what those keys mean? This instrument costs more than your life." The cruelty in his words cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. A ripple went through the crowd. Some guests turned away in discomfort. Others smirked at his confidence. Maya's face didn't change, but inside memories stirred, her mother's hands guiding hers across ivory keys, the sound of melodies filling the small apartment they once had. Music had been her world, her safe place, her truth. She bit the inside of her cheek, holding the memories close like a shield. Richard waved a hand dismissively. "Take her out. People come here for elegance, not sideshows." The guard reached for Maya's arm. Clara finally stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Wait, she hasn't done anything wrong." The room hushed again. Clara's small act of defiance hung in the air like a fragile flame, flickering but visible. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing at the interruption. In that moment, Maya stood caught between two forces, the weight of dismissal pushing her down and the faint glow of belief beginning to rise around her. The balance hadn't tipped yet, but the cracks in Richard's authority had started to show. And deep inside, beneath hunger and humiliation, something powerful stirred in Maya. Something that, when unleashed, would leave the whole lobby breathless. The guard's hand hovered near Maya's sleeve, ready to escort her out. She didn't move. Her body was still, but her mind slipped somewhere else, into the quiet corners of memory where music had once been everything. She remembered being 6 years old, perched on a piano bench that was too big for her legs to reach the floor. Her mother's voice had been warm and patient. "Feel the keys, Maya. Don't just press them. Listen to them. Let them tell you where to go." The sound of the old upright filled their tiny apartment, drowning out the noise of traffic outside. Her mother, a music teacher at a local school, couldn't afford much, but she gave Maya the one gift that mattered: time at the piano. For hours, Maya would practice scales until her small hands ached, and then, like magic, the aches turned into fluency. Notes began to flow, not just as exercises, but as living stories, each one carrying her deeper into a world no one else could take from her. Maya blinked and the lobby came back into focus. The crystal chandeliers, the murmur of wealthy guests, Richard's impatient scowl. None of them could see that history inside her, the countless hours of dedication that had built a skill sharper than any insult. The truth was, Maya hadn't touched a piano in months. After her mother passed away suddenly, the rent fell behind, and life had unraveled like a thread pulled too quickly. She had lost the apartment, lost the piano, and found herself on streets where music was only something in her head. Yet even without a keyboard, the melodies still came to her, insistent and alive, haunting her nights like unfinished conversations. Her fingers twitched now at her sides, muscle memory tugging at them like invisible strings. She could almost feel the ivory under her fingertips, smooth and cool, ready to sing. Clara, watching from a few feet away, noticed the way Maya's hands moved. They weren't random fidgets. They looked practiced, purposeful. Clara had seen pianists among her students, kids who lived for music class, and something in Maya's posture struck her as familiar. Ethan noticed it too, though he didn't understand why. He just knew that her stillness wasn't the stillness of fear. It was the stillness of someone holding back. Richard, of course, saw none of it. To him, Maya was just stubborn, a distraction he needed to erase before his guests grew restless. But the lobby was already shifting. People whispered, not just about her presence, but about the possibility she might actually play. Could she? Would she? Maya inhaled slowly. Inside, her mother's voice echoed again. One day, Maya, your music will speak louder than you ever can. The anticipation swelled like the pause before a storm. Something was coming, though no one yet knew how powerful it would be. And still, Maya stayed silent, holding her secret close, waiting for the moment when silence itself would break. The guard's hand finally closed around Maya's arm. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the climax of the scene. Another street kid swept out of sight, another inconvenience erased. Richard smirked, already picturing the lobby returning to its polished rhythm. But Maya planted her feet. For the first time, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Let me prove it. The words rang out, clear and steady. They silenced the room. Even the clinking of glasses seemed to stop. Richard frowned, caught off guard by the strength in her tone. Prove what? He asked, mocking. That you know chopsticks? I've got paying guests here, not an audience for your games. Maya's eyes didn't leave his. One song, she said. If I can't play, then I'll leave quietly. But if I can, her voice trailed, but the unfinished sentence carried weight. If she could, then what? Then they'd have to see her differently. Then Richard's power to dismiss her would crumble. The silence stretched. Guests exchanged glances. Curiosity began to outgrow irritation. Even Mrs. Whitmore, the woman in pearls, leaned forward. Why not let her try, Mr. Hale? It could be entertaining. Richard's pride flared. He wanted to refuse, but he could feel the eyes on him, and refusal now might make him look petty. He forced a laugh. Fine. One song, but make it quick. We have standards to uphold. He gestured grandly at the piano, sure she would stumble and humiliate herself. The guard released her. Maya walked to the piano, her sneakers whispering against the marble floor. Each step felt like stepping out of one life and into another. She pulled back the bench and sat, her small figure framed by the gleaming black instrument. For a moment, she just touched the keys, her fingers hovering above them like a bird testing the wind. The lobby held its breath. Richard folded his arms, smirking, already certain this would end in awkward silence. Then she began to play. The first notes came soft, deliberate, like a whisper. A melody unfolded, fragile, tender, yet sure. The air shifted instantly. Conversation stopped. Heads turned fully toward her. The song wasn't something anyone recognized right away, but it was haunting, beautiful, alive. Maya's fingers moved faster, dancing across the keys with a precision that betrayed years of practice. It was as though the piano had been waiting for her, aching for her touch. The notes soared, weaving into harmonies that filled every corner of the lobby. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Ethan set down his tray, forgetting entirely about his shift. Even the guard who had nearly dragged her away stood frozen, his stern face softened into awe. The song swelled into something larger, a storm of sound that carried sorrow and triumph in equal measure. Guests who had laughed before now leaned forward, eyes wide as though they had stumbled into a private concert. Mrs. Whitmore closed her eyes, swaying gently to the rhythm. Richard's smirk faltered. He tried to laugh it off, but no sound came. His cheeks burned. The lobby wasn't watching him anymore. They were transfixed by her. His control, so firm moments ago, slipped like sand through his fingers. Maya's mind drifted as she played. She saw her mother again, smiling in that small apartment, nodding encouragement. She saw nights of hunger and fear, her only comfort the memory of music. She poured all of it into the song. The grief, the hope, the defiance. Every note was her voice when words weren't enough. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the piece slowed. Her hands lingered on the last chord, letting it fade into silence that seemed louder than any sound before it. The lobby erupted. Applause crashed like thunder. Some guests stood to their feet, clapping, cheering. A few wiped tears from their eyes, caught off guard by the raw beauty they'd just witnessed. Maya sat still, her chest rising and falling, her fingers trembling slightly. She wasn't used to applause anymore. It felt unreal. Richard, red-faced, tried to recover. Well, that was impressive, I suppose, but this isn't a concert hall. Impressive? Mrs. Whitmore cut in, her voice sharp. That was extraordinary. Young lady, what is your name? Maya looked up, her voice steady. Maya Carter. Clara stepped forward, unable to hold back any longer. Maya, that was... I've never heard anything like it. She turned to Richard. You mocked her, in front of everyone. And she just gave us a gift none of us will forget. Ethan added quietly but firmly. She's more than any of us thought. The shift was complete. Richard no longer held the room. Maya did. For the first time that night, she wasn't invisible, wasn't dismissed. She had revealed her truth, and the truth had humbled every person who had doubted her. The power was no longer his, it was hers. The last echoes of applause still hung in the air when the crowd began to close in around Maya. Some guests wanted to shake her hand. Others simply wanted to tell her how deeply the music had touched them. For the first time in a long while, Maya didn't feel like a shadow passing through the world. She felt seen. Clara was the first to reach her. Maya, she said, voice trembling, you have a gift that belongs on a stage, not on the streets. You changed this room tonight. She wrapped a protective arm around the girl's shoulders, as though daring anyone else to mock her again. Ethan slipped closer too, his face bright with awe. I knew there was something about you, he admitted. I just didn't know it was this. Maya lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by the sudden wave of kindness. She had learned not to trust easily, but the warmth in Clara's voice and the sincerity in Ethan's eyes felt real, like a hand pulling her from the dark. And then Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward. The elderly woman's pearls caught the chandelier light as she spoke in a tone that carried weight. Mr. Hale, she said firmly, turning toward Richard, you owe this young lady an apology, and frankly, you owe all of us one. The crowd shifted, murmuring in agreement. Richard's face flushed red. He opened his mouth, but for once, words failed him. His arrogance, so strong only minutes ago, looked brittle now. Miss Carter, Mrs. Whitmore continued, addressing Maya directly, I serve on the board of the city's Arts Foundation. If you want it, we can arrange lessons, auditions, even scholarships. You belong in music halls, not hotel lobbies. Say the word and we'll help. The lobby gasped. An offer like that wasn't just generosity. It was a lifeline, a doorway into a new world. Clara squeezed Maya's shoulder proudly. Ethan's eyes widened with joy for her. Maya's throat tightened. For so long she had felt forgotten, unseen. And now this? She could hardly believe it. Richard, desperate to claw back control, finally spoke. This is absurd. We can't just... But before he could finish, another voice cut through, this time from the hotel's general manager, who had appeared at the edge of the crowd after hearing the commotion. His suit was impeccable, his expression unreadable. "Richard," he said coolly, "I think you've embarrassed this hotel enough for one evening." He turned to Maya with a respectful nod. "Young lady, that was extraordinary. On behalf of this establishment, please accept our apology." Then, with the crowd watching, he added the words Richard dreaded. "Mr. Hale, you'll turn in your keys and leave your position immediately. We have no room for cruelty in leadership." The guests erupted in murmurs, some shocked, others approving. Clara felt a surge of satisfaction, Ethan let out a low whistle, and Richard stood frozen, his pride shattering before everyone's eyes. With no defense left, he stormed away, his polished shoes clattering against the marble as though mocking him. The power shift was complete. The man who had mocked and dismissed her was gone, and Maya stood at the center of the lobby, not as a nuisance, but as the reason people would remember this night. Clara leaned in, her voice gentle. "You're not alone anymore, Maya. Whatever comes next, you have people who believe in you." Maya nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. The heaviness she had carried for months, grief, hunger, loneliness, lifted just enough for hope to slip in. Guests began taking out their phones, recording snippets of her performance, promising to share her story. The lobby, once a place of exclusion, had become a stage where truth had cut through pride and music had rewritten the rules. Maya stood, not with a triumphant shout, but with quiet dignity. She didn't need to say much. The music had already spoken louder than words ever could, and as she left the piano bench, walking with Clara and Ethan at her side, she carried something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. The world had tried to mock her, dismiss her, erase her, but tonight she had answered with music, and in that answer, she had found not just food, not just survival, but the beginning of a new life. 2 years later, the city's concert hall glowed with golden light. A banner stretched across the entrance. Maya Carter, live in concert. Inside, the seats were full, not with wealthy elites alone, but with children from schools, families from shelters, and ordinary people who never thought they'd step foot in such a place. Maya had made sure of it. Tickets were free for those who needed them. On stage, her hands danced across the grand piano with the same fire she carried in that hotel lobby. Each note carried her story, but it also carried a promise that no voice should be silenced, no gift ignored because of where someone came from. Clara sat proudly in the front row. Ethan worked backstage, helping organize the volunteers. The world that once mocked her now celebrated her. And Richard Hale? Rumor had it he was working in obscurity, his arrogance stripped away, a forgotten man in a world that had moved on. Maya's music became her legacy, and her message was clear. Dignity belongs to everyone. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it, because sometimes one small voice can change everything.